When someone mentions the name Hann's Park, it is usually in reference to a ball game at Silver Lake Field, but through the decades, Hann's Park has been built, blown away, rebuilt, torn down, and restored to its present-day grandeur. The history of Hann's Park is rich in detail and grounded in the social fabric of Martin County. Linnaeus and Sarah Hann moved their 6 children to South Silver Lake after purchasing 10 acres of land from the Reverend Asa Hann, a family relative who lived and preached in Martin County. Linnaeus farmed, operated a trading post, and worked as the center chain postmaster for 14 years. He also served as the justice of the peace in his community. Hann's Park founder Ernest Hann Sr. purchased several lakeshore acres from his father Linnaeus. Starting with 2 boats and a bathhouse, Ernest opened Hann's Park in 1893 at the age of 18. During the winter months, he worked as a fur buyer for 2 different fur buying companies, Macmillan and Hudson Bay Fur. It was a conflict of interest to work for rival companies, but Ernest had big plans for Hann's Park, and he needed the winter income to build the recreation center he envisioned. Ernest married Rose Seebeck of Le Sueur, Minnesota in 1905. They had 1 daughter, Rose Marie, and 1 son who died at birth. Rose Hann succumbed to TB in the spring of 1915. Located on the north shore of South Silver Lake, Hann's Park grew over the years to become one of the area's most popular entertainment spots. In 1912, Ernest installed a light plant and began generating his own light and power. This allowed him to adequately light the park grounds and swimming areas. Although Ernest enjoyed going to Florida during the winter months, this practice stopped in 1916 when Ernest started a commercial fishing business with partners Gus Sealing and Julius Simon. Ernest married Emma Sague on October 17, 1917. Ernest was 42 and his new bride 22 years his junior. Over the following 20 years, they had 6 children: Richard, who died of whooping cough as a baby, Francis, Harland, Ernest Jr., August, and Emma Lou. Ernest built a larger 3-story, 10-bedroom home that the couple used as a bed and breakfast hotel, as well as for their own living quarters. The hotel offered overnight visitors to the park convenient, comfortable lodging. Emma's older maiden sister, Judah Marie, or Mary, moved in and helped with child rearing, cooking, and many of the duties in the house and garden. In an effort to expand the park's attractions, Ernest purchased more land on the south shore of North Silver Lake, which lay across the county road from the ballroom. This then was known as the North Park. Ernest traveled to Chicago to look at the major league fields so he could build one in the North Park. Upon his return, he set up a major league-sized baseball diamond, bleachers, and a refreshment stand. Area ball teams drew crowds of 3,000 and more as they battled each other to claim winners' rights for their hometown. Pro-quality black players like Satchel Paige, who were not allowed in the major league, formed their own traveling teams, and Ernest hired several to play special exhibition games. The Kansas City Green Goblins, Harlem Globetrotters baseball team, and the Brooklyn Cuban Giants were 3 such teams to play local teams in the park. Even the Major League Brooklyn Dodgers, now the LA Dodgers, played the park in the off-season in October 1924. School was canceled, stores closed, and thousands of area fans filled the bleachers to see the Fairmont home team battle the big leaguers. Newspaper reports recounted that the Fairmont hometown boys gave the Dodger big leaguers a real run for their money. The 4th of July was always a day of activity and celebration. In 1921, the festivities included a wrestling match between Jack Downs and Ralph Barquette, baseball games, an air show with stunt pilots, swimming, and fireworks. The fireworks were to have been dropped from the stunt plane. However, the propeller was damaged during one of the shows, and the plane crashed into the lake. The pilots were rescued safely, however, parts of the plane remained in the lake. Ernest implemented $5,000 worth of improvements to the park. A new, larger dance hall was built, one of the largest in the area. Motion picture equipment was purchased, and the park had the first silver screen in the county. Silent films were shown, and the dance hall was also equipped for basketball games. The House of David and Harlem Globetrotters were 2 of the many teams to play there. The club was named the Gay Paris nightclub after one in Chicago. New Year's Eve and the Pheasant Hunters' Ball were the biggest nights of the year. Pheasant hunting in Martin County drew people from all over the state. Crowds of 500 people would jam the ballroom after a day of hunting. Vaudeville was alive and well on the stage at Hann's Park. Lawrence Welk Al Menke, Guy Lombardo, Cab Calloway, Fats Waller, and Duke Ellington were a few of the many bands that played Hans Park's Gay Paris Ballroom. Many got their start in show business by playing places like the park. Every table was reserved for New Year's Eve, and a band or floor show provided the evening's entertainment. Acts, including an occasional burlesque show, crossed the stage of the Gay Paris nightclub. After the dance was complete, a chicken dinner could be had for a mere 45 cents. One of the most unusual attractions to take place at Hans Park was one Professor N.B. Kuykendall, a trick swimmer. As onlookers sat beneath the oaks lining the hillside above the park's beach, Professor Kuykendall would have a spectator securely bind him hand and foot. While pulling 23 people in 2 boats, he would swim securely bound for a distance of 75 yards. Ernest was a firm believer in advertising. During the 1920s and 30s, he spent between $125 and $150 per month in over 25 area newspapers on advertising. His diligence and expense usually paid off handsomely. Crowd attendance grew steadily. In an effort to diversify, Ernest, with the help of the Agricultural Department of the University of Minnesota, set up the largest turkey farm in the United States in 1930. It was the first time that anyone had experimented with raising turkeys in large numbers. At one time, they had 7,800 turkeys and 1,100 chickens. In a United Press release, the headline read, "Main Street in Turkey Town." An accompanying picture showed the arrangement of turkey sheds and the unique feeding apparatus. The Hann turkey farm attracted national attention because it was the first farm of its kind to raise turkeys in such a large scale. For all their innovations and hard work, the project did not succeed. After spending over $6,000 on feed during the Depression years, the operation failed due to disease and poor prices. Undaunted, Ernest turned full attention to Hans Park's other activities. South Silver Lake offered good fishing, and Ernest was quick to inform an angler of the better fishing spots on the lake. The park's beach attractions included a beautiful sand swimming beach with 2 docks. One was in shallow water for children and non-swimmers to enjoy, while the other was a deep water pier with a good springboard for the more advanced athlete. A high dive tower was set up in the deep water, and water shows were put on by expert divers. There were 14 boats for rent, plus fishing poles, live bait, and a large fishing dock available for the stationary sportsman. An extensive children's playground stood at the top of the hill overlooking the bathers below. A huge bathhouse replaced the original one, allowing people to change clothes, rent bathing equipment, and store their belongings safely. A water wheel and boat slide ran the length of the hillside above the beach. Visitors sat in the boat and slid down the track specifically designed for the boats to the lake, ending in a very wet splash, not unlike the log rides at today's amusement parks. Fortunately, there were enough riders in the boat to help pull it back up the hill after the short, exciting ride. The highest toboggan slide in the area tempted the adventurous swimmers to ride wooden water toboggans on a quick, exciting ride to the cool lake waters below. A free act stage, a kind of bandstand, near the beach offered entertainment for those people who preferred not to get wet. They could sit in the shade of the hillside and watch the entertainment provided. There was a shooting gallery and a souvenir stand near the entrance of the park. Another free act stage offered onlookers magician acts, bands, and various other performances. Ernest also operated a campground in the North Park. If the weather was good, every space was filled with campers. On game days, Ernest would stock hamburgers and hot dogs 100 pounds at a time. He'd order several thousand buns and often have to drive into Fairmont for more before the end of the game. The most important purpose the park served was as a social meeting place, which is something our high-tech society is sorely lacking today. Many a young couple met at Hans Park celebrations. The park provided a pleasant environment for young love to blossom. It gave hard-working people an inexpensive window to a world of exotic acts. Sunday was an event not to be missed. Unfortunately, in this day of TV and VCRs and non-social living patterns, the art of enjoying an afternoon with friends is quickly being lost. Nature struck the heaviest blow to Hans Park in 1936. On April 30th at 5:45 in the afternoon, a tornado ripped through Martin County. It started near Esterville and left a path of destruction that was over 60 miles long. Several people in Martin County died in the wake of this unmerciful storm. Nothing remained of Hans Park Dance Hall or Ballpark. The family house, while still standing, was no longer on its foundation. After settling insurance claims, Ernest rebuilt the dance hall in a smaller pavilion style. His brother, Ellery Hann, designed a unique, tornado-proof roof style. The roof's beams were massive redwood and bolted in a self-supporting fashion. It was his intent to give the next big wind a much sturdier target. The park recovered from the tornado's destruction in time for the outbreak of World War II and the polio epidemic. The polio threat in itself spelled the end of an era at Hann's Park, since beaches were closed in an effort to slow the spread of polio. It was speculated that public beaches could possibly be the source of the spread of the disease. Ernest Hann Sr. suffered an unexpected fatal heart attack on June 1, 1952. He had worked hard the day before, Memorial Day, and his death was a shock to all who knew him. At the age of 76, he died, leaving Emma to run the park. Emma turned her energies to running the park with the help of her sister Mary. Since the swimming crowds were gone, Emma decided to promote the ballroom. She developed a new dining style, the smorgasbord. She also designed the first salad bar in this area. In 1965, Emma was involved in a car accident, and several months later she suffered a heart attack. The attack made it impossible to continue the pace she had to maintain. She could no longer operate the ballroom. The Civic Summer Theater was organized in 1965 and approached Emma with a proposal to use the dance hall to present their first two summer productions, Babes in Arms and The Italian Straw Hat. For her generous donation of the stage, Emma was made an honorary lifetime member of the theater. After suffering a paralyzing stroke, Emma passed gently away in February of 1972. To settle the estate, August Hann purchased the park and went about remodeling and refurbishing the house and ballroom. He and his family continued to operate the park until the mid-70s, when he sold the family property to Dave and Linda Richardson. After 82 years, Hann's Park was no longer owned by a Hann. The Richardsons ran the ballroom for several years. In the 1980s, the ballroom fell into ruin and was dismantled piece by piece and sold for salvage. Only the roof, that tornado-proof roof, survived the destruction. In 1992, Shelley Hand Abbott and her husband Bruce purchased the Hann's Park ball field and went about restoring the neglected field to its former glory. The playing field had been rutted up and required extensive repair, with large earth-moving and grading equipment. Canada thistle was overpowering the field grass, and vegetation had overgrown the entire property. Garbage and appliances had been dumped in the woods, and a building's concrete foundation lay in a heap near the field. The only remaining evidence of the once grand field was the 1930s-style concession stand. With the help of community volunteers and hours of labor by the Abbott's family, Shelley Hand Abbott saw her dream of restoring the park's ball field realized. In 1995, the field was officially reopened and featured a 4-H Rally Day event. In the following years, Hann's Park Silver Lake Field has become the home field for the Fairmont Girls Traveling Softball League, Men's Fast Pitch Team, Pee Wee Baseball Team, and Area 4-H teams. The team for the movie Field of Dreams played an exhibition game as a 4-H fundraiser at the park in 1997, drawing over 1,000 people to sit under the oaks at Hann's Park Silver Lake Field. The Fairmont Railroad Freight Depot was moved to its new home at the park and transformed into the Hann's Park Museum and Meeting Hall. Dan St. John and Bruce Abbott used their time and talents to provide park visitors with welcoming shelter. They went on to restore the 1930s-era concession stand that was sagging from years of neglect. The spirit of the park has survived for over 100 years due to the hard work of the Hand family and the dedication of community volunteers. The following have played a part in keeping the spirit of Hann's Park alive.